She was 11 years old, standing in the rain outside the most expensive hotel in Lagos, and she had exactly one plan. It wasn't a good plan. Even she knew that. Her school shoes were soaked through, her uniform clung to her back, and the security guard at the gate had already told her twice, firmly then impatiently, to go home. But Zara Okafor had nowhere to go. Not really. Because home was a two-room apartment on the third floor of a building on the mainland where her mother had been lying in the same bed for 3 weeks, and the hospital had called that morning to say that if the bill wasn't settled by Friday, they would have to discharge her. Discharge her, as if her mother were a guest who had overstayed, not a woman whose kidneys were slowly shutting down. So Zara stood in the rain and she waited. She had heard about him from her aunt. Jae-Hyun Kang, Korean billionaire, tech company owner, the kind of man whose name appeared in headlines she barely understood. He was staying at the Grand Meridian for 2 days. Business meetings. He was reportedly the kind of man who gave jobs on the spot if your pitch was good enough. Her aunt had laughed when she said it, the way adults laughed when they were nervous for you. He's not going to hire an 11-year-old Zara. But her aunt hadn't seen the hospital bill. Zara had. She'd memorized every number on it. The rain got heavier. The lobby lights through the glass doors glowed golden, warm, impossibly far away. And then the doors opened and a man walked out. He wasn't what she expected. She had imagined someone taller, somehow. Someone with an entourage and dark sunglasses and the general posture of a person who knew cameras were always nearby. Instead, Jae-Hyun Kang walked out of the Grand Meridian alone, wearing a plain gray shirt, jacket folded over his arm, phone in hand, and a look on his face that said he was thinking about 17 things and none of them were pleasant. His assistant, a wiry man who walked 2 steps behind with the energy of someone perpetually late, was already talking into a second phone. Zara stepped forward. The security guard moved to block her, but she was faster than he expected, slipping under his arm, and before anyone could stop her she was standing directly in front of Kang Jae-Hyun, rain dripping off the end of her nose, looking up at him with eyes that had been practicing this moment for 3 days. "Excuse me, sir," she said. "My name is Zara Okafor. I'm 11. I'm very hardworking. I need a job." He stopped. His assistant's voice faltered mid-sentence. The security guard grabbed her shoulder, but Jae-Hyun raised one hand without looking at him and the guard went still. Jae-Hyun looked at the girl. She was small, too small to be standing in a storm outside a hotel at 7 in the evening, and she was absolutely drenched and she was not moving. He had been approached by hundreds of people who wanted something from him. Investors with rehearsed pitches. Journalists with practiced smiles. Mothers thrusting CVs on behalf of grown children. But he had never had someone 11 years old step in front of him in the rain and ask for a job with the calm certainty of someone who had already decided that failure was not an option tonight. "A job," he said. Not a question. Just the word repeated back like he was testing its weight. "Yes, sir." She did not flinch. "Any job. I can run errands. I can translate Yoruba for you. I know how things work in this city. I can carry bags, sort papers, organize things. I'm a fast learner." A beat. Then, because she had promised herself she would say the hard part out loud, "My mother is sick. She's in St. Vincent's Hospital on the mainland. The bill is 480,000 naira. They're going to send her home on Friday even though she can't walk yet." The rain was loud on the hotel canopy above them. Somewhere behind him, his assistant had gone completely silent. Jae-Hyun looked at this child, at the way she'd locked her jaw to keep her chin from trembling, at the list she'd clearly rehearsed until it was smooth, at the school uniform underneath her jacket that she'd clearly put on that morning intending to go somewhere respectable, and something he couldn't quite name moved through him. Not pity. Something more like recognition. He had been surrounded by people all week who wanted things from him but couldn't say so plainly. Executives who wrapped requests in slides and dinner invitations. Partners who smiled until they didn't. And here was this child in the rain saying, "My mother is dying and I need help and I am offering everything I have." "What's your mother's name?" he asked. The girl blinked like she hadn't expected that question. "Amara. Amara Okafor." He was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to his assistant. "Damon." He didn't need to say anything else. Damon already had his own phone out. "The hospital bill first," Jae-Hyun said quietly. "And then find out what she needs." Zara's mouth opened, then closed. Then she said, "Sir, I still want the job. I'm not asking for charity." He looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time that evening, something shifted in his expression. It wasn't quite a smile. It was closer to the face a person makes when they hear something true. "Come inside," he said. You're going to get sick standing in the rain. If you're new here, welcome, and if you've been around for a while, you already know we don't do half measures on this channel. Like this video if you believe in stories that actually go somewhere, subscribe so you never miss the next one and leave a comment below. What do you think Zara does next? I'll be reading every single one. The lobby of the Grand Meridian was everything Zara had seen through the glass from the outside, and somehow more. She had been to hotels before, her class had done a tourism field trip to a smaller one on the island in year 5, but this was different. The ceilings went up until they became art. The floor was a kind of marble she didn't know the name for. And everything was quiet in the way that expensive places are quiet, like the sound itself had been asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement. She sat on the edge of a chair in the lobby, still dripping slightly, while Daemin made calls 6 feet away in rapid Korean. Jae-Hyun had disappeared to his suite for 15 minutes and come back with a dry towel and a look that was harder to read. "How did you know where I was staying?" he asked, sitting across from her. "My aunt works at a dry cleaner near the hotel. One of the housekeeping staff mentioned your name." She paused. "I Googled you. And what did Google tell you? That you started your first company at 19 and sold it at 24. That you have 3 patents. That your mother is on your company's board of directors." She hesitated. "And that you give interviews where you say you believe in people who show up." Something passed across his face. "You memorized my interviews." "I memorized the parts that were useful." He leaned back. "Zara, how long has your mother been sick?" 8 weeks. Her voice went flat and practiced, the way it went when she told the story too many times. "It started as fatigue. Then her legs swelled. The doctor at the local clinic said it was her kidneys. They referred her to St. Vincent's." She looked at her hands. "My aunt has been helping, but she has her own children. And she stopped. Started again. I didn't want to just wait. So you came here. I had to do something." He was quiet for a while. Daemin approached, said something low in Korean, showed him his phone screen. Jae-Hyun read whatever was on it and nodded once. Daemin withdrew. "The hospital will receive payment tonight," Jae-Hyun said. "Your mother will not be discharged on Friday." The sound Zara made was not quite a word. She pressed both hands flat against her knees and stared at the marble floor and breathed very carefully through her nose, because she was 11 and she had promised herself she would not cry in front of anyone important. "Thank you," she said when she trusted her voice again. "Don't thank me yet." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You said you wanted a job. So I have a question for you. What's the hardest thing you've done in the last month?" She looked up. "Got out of bed every morning when I didn't want to." He held her gaze. "Good answer." What followed was the strangest week of Zara's life, and she had already had several strange weeks. Jae-Hyun did not give her a formal job. She was 11, he was careful to remind her, and there were rules about these things. But he did something that, in her mind, was better. He told Daemin to arrange for her to shadow him for the remaining days of his Lagos visit, during appropriate hours, and to be compensated for her time. She told him what appropriate hours looked like, after school and not past 8, and he accepted her terms without negotiation, which she found slightly suspicious and then decided to trust. She expected to be a spectator. She was not. The first afternoon, she sat in on a meeting with a Lagos real estate developer who was trying to convince Jae-Hyun to anchor a tech hub development on the island. The developer had a lot of slides with a lot of numbers. Halfway through, the developer made a reference to local community integration that was so vague it was nearly decorative, and Zara, without entirely meaning to, said, "What does that actually mean for the people who already live near the site?" The room went still. The developer stared at her. Jae-Hyun looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite place. And then he turned back to the developer and said, "That's a fair question. What does it mean?" The developer stumbled. The meeting went differently after that. Afterward, in the car, Daemin was very quiet in the front seat. Jae-Hyun was looking out the window. "Was that wrong?" Zara asked. "No," he said. "It was correct." "Will he still do the deal?" "Probably. But he'll have to give a better answer first." She nodded slowly. "My mother says the real test of a plan is whether it still holds up when someone who has nothing to lose asks a question." Jae-Hyun turned from the window and looked at her. "Your mother sounds like a remarkable person." "She is." A beat. "Can I meet her?" Another beat. "If she's well enough, yes." Zara Okafor was not what Jae-Hyun had expected. He had driven to St. Vincent's on the 3rd day, with Zara in the back seat doing her homework with the focused efficiency of someone who had learned to use every available minute. The hospital was busy, underfunded in the way hospitals often were, But Amara was in a room now rather than a ward bay, because the payment had cleared and someone had made a call. She was sitting up when they arrived, which Zara had apparently told her was important, because when Zara had called ahead she'd said, "Mama, sit up please." First impressions. Zara Okafor was thin and tired and lit up completely when her daughter walked through the door. She held Zara's face in both hands for a long moment before she even looked at the man standing behind her. When she did look at him, it was directly. No performance. No gratitude performance, specifically, the kind Jae-Hyun had seen on the faces of people who thought they owed him something. She just looked at him and said, "You're the one who helped my daughter." "Your daughter helped herself," he said. "I just answered a question." Amara laughed, a real one, short and warm. "She told me she gave you a full CV in the rain." "She did. It was thorough." Zara was already pulling the chair close to the bed, settling in, explaining things. The meeting yesterday, the developer's slide that had the wrong figures, the fact that she'd asked Daemin to teach her 3 phrases in Korean and he'd looked at her like she'd suggested something mildly illegal. Amara listened with the particular quality of attention that parents give their children when they are watching them become themselves, and Jae-Hyun sat in the chair near the window and found, to his own slight surprise, that he did not want to leave. He had been in Lagos for business. He had not expected to find anything else. His life and soul was organized around the principle of useful motion. Every meeting was a vector, every relationship had a purpose, every hour was accounted for. It was efficient and it was, he had acknowledged to himself on certain late nights, very lonely. He stayed at the hospital for 2 hours. When they left, he was quiet in the car for a long time. "She used to be a waitress," Zara said eventually, not looking up from her book. "Before she got sick. At a hotel not far from here. She saved money for 7 years to give me the school I go to." He said nothing. "I think she'd like to go back to work someday," Zara continued. "When she's better. She doesn't like being still." He looked out at the Lagos traffic, chaotic and alive and nothing like Seoul, and thought about a woman who had worked 7 years in a hotel to give her daughter something better, and who was now lying in a hospital bed, and whose daughter had stood in the rain outside a Billionaire's hotel because she had decided, with the complete seriousness of a child who has had to become something older, that doing nothing was not acceptable. "What does she want to do?" he asked. "When she's better." Zara considered. "She's always said she wanted to run her own place. Something small. Not a hotel. More like a restaurant. She writes recipes in a notebook she keeps on the table." Pause. "She's been writing in it for years." Jae-Hyun nodded slowly. "Tell me about the recipes." He extended his stay by 4 days. Daemin, to his credit, said nothing, only rearranged the calendar with the expression of a man who had long ago made peace with the unpredictability of people he worked for. The business meetings continued. The real estate developer came back with better answers. 3 other meetings bore the kind of fruit that justified the trip on paper. But in the margins of those days, something else was happening. Jae-Hyun went back to the hospital twice more. He brought food the second time, proper food, not the thin soup of hospital wards, and sat with Amara while Zara finished her homework at the foot of the bed. They talked about Lagos, about the food, about the city's particular kind of stubbornness and warmth. Amara told him about growing up in Ibadan, about coming to Lagos at 22 with a bag and a phone number written on a piece of paper, about the first job she'd gotten, clearing tables, and how she'd memorized every dish on the menu by the end of the first week because she'd decided that if she was going to do something, she was going to know it completely. "Sounds familiar," he said, glancing at Zara. Amara smiled. "She gets it from someone." He told her in return things he hadn't told anyone in a while. About the company, the real version, not the press release version. About the pressure his mother applied like weather, constant and encompassing. About the feeling, which had arrived gradually over the past few years, that he was building things without knowing what any of it was for. Amara listened without offering solutions. He noticed that most people, when he said something difficult, immediately tried to fix it. She just listened and then said, "Maybe you've been building the wrong things. What would the right things be?" She looked at Zara, bent over her textbook, mouthing something as she read. Things that matter to people who didn't already have everything. He was quiet for a long time after that. On his last scheduled day in Lagos, his mother called. He was in the hotel lobby when it happened, waiting for the car. Madam Kang's name appeared on his phone and he felt, as he always did, the particular tightening of the chest that meant he was about to have a conversation designed to remind him of his obligations. He answered. She didn't waste time. She'd heard he was still in Lagos. Daemin's assistant had said something or someone had said something she always knew, and she wanted to understand why. He told her it was business. She said she'd heard otherwise. She said Mr. Park's daughter was in Seoul and waiting, and this was not the time for distractions, especially not the kind of distractions that could embarrass the family. She said the word distractions in a specific way that he understood completely and was not going to respond to. "I'll be home when I'm home," he said. She was silent for 3 seconds, which, with Madame Kang, was the equivalent of a formal warning. Then she said, "You have worked your whole life to build something. Don't let sentiment undo what strategy built." He said goodbye and hung up and sat for a moment in the lobby, phone in his hand. Jae-Min appeared at his elbow. "Car's here." "I know." "Madame Kang?" "Yes." Pause. Then Jae-Min, who never offered opinions, said, "For what it's worth." "The girl, Zara." When she asked that question in the meeting, he stopped. Started again. "I haven't seen you pay attention like that in 2 years." Jae-Hyun looked at him. "Just an observation," Jae-Min said and walked toward the car. He went back to Seoul. He had meetings. He had the Park dinner, which was exactly as transactional as he'd known it would be. Mr. Park's daughter was elegant and educated and had absolutely no interest in him either, which was at least honest. His mother watched him across the table with the eyes of someone taking inventory. He smiled and said the right things and felt the whole time like a photograph of himself rather than the actual person. He thought about Amara's notebook full of recipes. He thought about a girl standing in the rain with a prepared speech and school shoes that were soaked through. He called the hospital twice, officially, to confirm the ongoing treatment arrangements. He told himself that was the extent of it. He told himself that what happened in Lagos was useful data, a reminder that the world was larger than the circles he moved in, and that sentiment was not a business strategy. He lasted 3 weeks. It was Jae-Min who finally said it. They were in the office late, going through the Q4 numbers, and Jae-Hyun had been staring at the same page for 6 minutes without turning it, and Jae-Min put down his own papers and said simply, "Go." Jae-Hyun looked up. "What?" "Lagos. Go. The numbers will be the same on Monday." "I'm not." "Sir." Jae-Min said the word with the weight of years. "You turned your phone off after your mother called that last day in Lagos. I saw your face. And I have worked for you for 6 years and I have never seen you turn your phone off." Pause. "Whatever is there, it's worth more than what's here right now." Jae-Hyun said nothing. Jae-Min stood up, collected his jacket and said, "The flight is 4 hours. Sleep on the plane. I'll rearrange the morning." She was at the restaurant. Not the hospital. Amara was out of the hospital now, had been for 2 weeks, moving slowly and carefully and insisting she was fine with the particular insistence of women who do not have time to be anything else. She was at a small restaurant near the market, a friend's place, helping out in the kitchen 3 mornings a week, building herself back slowly the way Zara had described. One thing at a time, steady. Jae-Hyun walked in without calling ahead. He hadn't known how to explain it in words, and he'd decided the only way to do this honestly was to just appear. She was at the counter talking to the owner and she looked up when the door opened and she went very still. He said, "I came back." She said, "I can see that. Not for business." She looked at him for a long moment, the look of someone measuring something, deciding whether to trust what they were measuring. Then she said, "Sit down. I'll make you something." He sat. Zara appeared from somewhere in the back. Apparently she came here after school now, and said without looking up from her phone, "I told Mama you'd come back." "You told her that?" "I told her at least 3 weeks ago." She finally looked up. "You have the face of someone who finishes things." He laughed. It came out real and uncomplicated, the way laughing only does when something has gone exactly right. In the months that followed, some things changed and some things did not. Madame Kang did not change, but she became less loud about what she expected, perhaps because she could see for the first time in years that her son had found his footing somewhere. The park dinner faded into the long list of things that had been tried and set aside. Jae-Min, when asked later, would say only that he had done nothing except observe the obvious. Amara got stronger. The restaurant she'd dreamed about, the small one, not a hotel, something with her own hands in it, began quietly with a lease on a space in the neighborhood she knew and seed funding from a source she had not asked for but accepted without reducing herself to accept it. It was not charity, he had made clear. It was an investment in someone who had already proven, over 7 years of careful savings and 1 notebook full of recipes, that she understood exactly what she was doing. Zara turned 12. She gave a speech at school about persistence. Her teacher sent her mother a note saying she had never heard a student describe their own experience with that particular combination of precision and warmth. Her mother put the note in the notebook between 2 recipes. And on a Thursday evening in December, when the Lego sky had gone the particular shade of orange and gold that it saved for the end of the year, Jae-Hyun Kang stood at the counter of a small restaurant that smelled like jollof rice and cardamom and something he couldn't name but had already started to think of as home, and said to no one in particular, to Zara at her homework, to Amara at the stove, "I didn't know it would be this." "What did you think it would be?" Amara asked without turning around. "I didn't know. That's the point." She turned then and smiled and said, "Eat first. Philosophy after." He ate. That's the story. If it stayed with you, like, subscribe and drop a comment below. Tell me, what did Zara do that you'd have been too afraid to do? And which moment hit you hardest? I read every comment. See you in the next one.